Winston, thank you so much for joining us at this year's Forbidden Courses. I'm really excited to chat with you, and there's going to be a lot of time for Q&A toward the end of this session. You're the former banjo player and lead guitarist for the band Mumford & Sons, and you now host a podcast that I love called Marshall Matters through The Spectator. You're really prolific writer, interviewer, civil rights activist, and more. So there's a lot to talk about today. I want to get started, though, by asking you a little bit about your journey from traveling around, sleeping in pubs, to going all over the globe to perform with Mumford & Sons.
Well, first of all, thank you, Audrey, and thank you all for having me, and not just the University of Austin faculty and team, but the students as well. I had the pleasure of sitting in on one of Glenn Lowry's seminars yesterday, and the level and the caliber of conversation was very impressive and gives me tremendous hope for this budding institution. And also makes me quite nervous to sit in front of you all, because you're obviously a bright bunch. But thank you for having me. Yes, so I was a member of Mumford & Sons for 14 years. We started in 2007 playing pubs around London, and we played every pub in London, I think, and then tried to play every pub and venue in England, and then Scotland, and then we sort of veered towards, we did some in Germany, and it just grew and grew, and then we started coming to the States, and we toured very hard, and being on stage was, back on stage, but being on stage was the kind of the sacred spot. That was where a musician, I think, or a performer transcends the worldly, or at least in your mind you do, and I guess that's the thing I miss the most, actually, is being on stage. But we made 4 albums and several EPs, and it was the privilege of a lifetime, and very proud of what I did with those guys. Incredibly talented boys, great songwriters and musicians, and then 2 years ago, last week, I quit on account of a Twitter storm where I had tweeted about a book critical of Antifa by the conservative American journalist Andy Ngo, and it turned into a Twitter storm where it went up all the trending charts in my country and yours, and was a segment on various news segments from The View to Tucker, and the activists, the Antifa activists, came not just after me, but all the people I work with, friends, and I wanted to do everything I could to make it right and protect them, and issued an apology, which over the coming months burnt on my conscience pretty deeply, because I don't think I had done, or what I had criticized was, I think I was right to criticize. So I'd investigated, looked into it, and the more I did, the more I felt that I had actually not done anything wrong, and I think an artist's responsibility, and I think maybe I would even say all our responsibilities, certainly here in the Academy, is to pursue the truth, and I felt that the apology would be detrimental to anything I were to say, write, any music or written word in the future, and but also that in eventually retracting my apology, it would be unfair on the band to face the consequences of that. So I felt like the only thing I could do was quit. Actually, you and I, Audrey, we spoke on your podcast, and I talked at length at all the punishment for wrongthink in the creative industries, and I could list off, but it's probably boring for you, all the artists that are being punished for having the wrong opinions, and it's a very small industry, the creative industries. There's not many people, everyone sort of knows each other, and like any world or industry, whether it's the Academy or whether it's Wall Street, industries are prone to groupthink, and I think that the creative industries is overwhelmingly progressive, well, actually, I'm not totally sure whether it's overwhelmingly progressive or whether a small minority of progressives have a stranglehold on the rest of everyone else. Although this morning I saw that GLAAD, Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, published a letter with hundreds of artists, including Jamila Jamil and Wanda Sykes, Dylan Mulvaney, I'm not sure he's an artist, but many artists saying they wanted social media platforms to enforce censorship, and that included for dead naming or misgendering gender dysphoric children or people, as well as for anyone critical of, I forget the exact wording, but something like critical care for, life-saving care for trans children, minors, something like that. So, you know, you can't criticize that. And it's quite literally hundreds of artists signing it. So actually, maybe it's overwhelming progressives. It's worth having a look at that letter, because it really gives you a taste or an insight into the state of the creative industries in America and Britain today.
And if you haven't read Winston's resignation letter from a couple years ago, I highly recommend it. It's really profound, the lessons, I think, that can be drawn from it, and it's a great example of bravery, too, I think. And I'm interested because, I mean, it's no small thing to have a really successful music career. It's even more difficult, though, to have a really successful career in one industry and then to pivot into podcasting and journalism the way you have. And we have a lot of young students here who are trying to figure out their careers, what they want to do in the world. And I wonder if you can speak a little bit to choosing an industry and starting a career.
I really don't feel quite particular. You can't ask a banjo player turned YouTuber that sort of advice. I really don't feel I should give any. But maybe I'll say that you should pursue your passions and also work as hard as you can at every opportunity that is in front of you. And for now, that's your studies. One of the conversations we've been discussing is people go to university to try and get a certificate at the end to get them a great job, and I won't completely sort of shit on that, but this shouldn't be what education is about. It should be about becoming a master of a topic and really going to its deepest depths for the sake of that alone. And I think that applies to whatever work you do in life. But yeah, that's the only advice I'm going to give.
Awesome. And to shift gears a tiny bit, I have been really grateful because you're one of the few people right now talking about the mass incarceration of the Uyghurs under the Chinese Communist Party. You also have a really great organization that helps connect Hong Kongers with residents in the United Kingdom to help them relocate. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that work.
Yeah, so the Uyghurs, well, there are between 1 and 3 million Uyghurs in re-education camps and camps in Xinjiang in Western China. I'm sure you know about that. I mean, I'm not sure how much I've done some Uyghur events in London. I remember, and this is maybe a question I've been thinking about a lot, which maybe I'll throw to you guys, is I remember the summer 2020, the BLM in London, the BLM protests caught the imagination of the nation, and tens of, not hundreds of thousands were protesting as they were here. A month later, I went on a Uyghur protest in London, in Parliament Square, in the same place where the BLM protests had happened. And I think there were 30 of us. And what I've been trying to work out is why why has the plight of the Uyghurs not caught the imagination quite like racism in America? Although this conversation I had with Glenn, or I think it was part of the seminar, was that George Floyd killing actually a racist killing? But that aside, why is it that the racist incarceration of 1 to 3 million Uyghurs has not caught the imagination of the world, but racism in America has? And there's some answers I've got, which is that American culture is so huge and widespread that even being brought up in Britain is to have, you're sort of marinated in American culture to a certain extent. So it's easier. And by contrast, Chinese culture, apart from sort of some restaurants, really, there's not, it's an impenetrable language, and it's a failure of education. I don't think we've really understand China's, but that's something that doesn't quite apply here, because obviously this is America, these are your issues, and China's far off. But in Britain, it was neither of them were in our country, and yet one of them caught the imagination of the nation, and the other is just no one gives a damn. And it's very frustrating. I've been trying to work on it by doing Uyghur cultural events to try and show the world who the Uyghurs are, or show people in London, but people don't care too much. And then Hong Kong, in January 2021, the British government started the BNO scheme. This was actually announced in the summer of 2020, which said that Hong Kongers born before the handover in 1997 would be allowed to work in Britain for 5 years, and work and live, at which point they would be able to apply for full citizenship, which I was in favour of. I'm pro-immigration. But no one was doing anything about integration and assimilation. So I didn't know how. I was a bit frustrated that sort of fell to the feet of a banjo player come YouTuber. But I nevertheless thought we should do something, and I was meeting loads of Hong Kongers, so we put together a sort of buddy system, and we still do workshops to help Hong Kongers assimilate to British life. So that's sort of one of the things. I'm not quite sure why I didn't have a huge sort of, I've only been to Hong Kong a couple of times, and I didn't know too much about it, but it just felt like a gap that someone needed to do something. So I was like, right, well, let's do it. But yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I would love to open it up for questions now. I have lots more myself, but I'll let others ask. Yeah. If we start in the front row, I think I just saw a hand, or actually right in front of me. Yeah, second row.
Hi, hello. Thank you so much for speaking with us. My name is Thomas, and I just graduated from Duke University. And I'm wondering how the backlash has been to you with your podcast and all of that from the Chinese government, if any, because of your activism with the Uyghurs or the Hong Kongers as well.
I don't know of anything, but I think I might have had a spy living with me. I'm not entirely sure, and I have strong evidence, but I have my suspicions. So I was taking in Hong Kong. It was actually the first bunch before the BNO scheme started. So it was it was real. They were more refugees, Hong Kongers, rather than BNO scheme. They were young protesters who the CCP were, who on trumped-up charges were told they'd have 10 years in prison, so they got the hell out of Hong Kong. And one of them this story didn't add up, and then at the end she gave me this box that she said was a hard drive, but it was fucking huge, and she was like, "Can you keep that?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then she was causing trouble with others, so there was something fishy about it. But I think I'm letting that in a sort of the romance of a spy being in my house kind of get the better of me. I'm not sure it was, but I haven't. Although there are plenty of spies. A friend of mine called Majid Nawaz, who's also done a lot of activism on the Uyghur topic, did a hunger strike in front of the Chinese embassy on Portland Place in London. And after he did that, to bring attention to the plight of the Uyghurs, after he did that, he was followed by a spy for a considerable amount of time. And you know, when Xi Jinping last came to London, or one of his last visits, the whole of the Mall was full of Chinese Brits waving the Chinese flag. And Chinatown in London is pro-CCP. So amongst the Chinese, and there's a Chinese mafia that operate there, amongst the Chinese in Britain, there's some who, and I imagine it's the same here, there are some who are sympathetic. One of the other problems we had was that in assimilating Hong Kongers is that Chinese churches in the UK are told that they have to, their authority is to the CCP before it is to God or Christ. So the churches who traditionally and actually did a lot to help the arriving Hong Kongers. The Hong Kongers themselves didn't trust the Chinese churches because of that dynamic. So it's a very complicated situation.
Well, thank you. That's fascinating.
And if we move over here on the left front row.
Thanks. Thanks again, Winston, for being here. My name's Tobias, and my question is, do you view China as sort of this fundamentally incorrect society that we need to find a way to wean ourselves off of, or is it only this, you know, or do you have a more nuanced take where it's this problem with the concentration camps and that specifically is what we need to work on eliminating?
I would prioritize my personal energies on the latter. I don't feel totally qualified to answer that question, sort of the geopolitical question. I think Sam Bokosian might be better. There's a sort of expert on China in the room. He'll get a better answer than I will. I'm not quite sure there.
And right on the left.
Hey. Firstly, it's nice to hear another British accent, though I am looking forward to hearing Kathleen speak later too. My question is a quick one. How did you adapt from kind of going from a music celeb-dominated environment to a political one?
One difference I've noticed is that I think it's more competitive in the media world. Everyone's chasing the story to get it out there before, you know, if you're not first, you're last, and everyone's out to get the story out first. Whereas in music, there's sort of room for everyone. It's your art, we'll support you in your art, and I guess there's charts and there's kind of competitions and awards where there's a sort of competition, but I never felt that it was competitive like that. I'd also say that I found that people in this world, in the intellectual space and media world, to be lovely. Okay, everyone's so nice. So even though it's competitive, there's a very supportive community, and no one's trying to sort of bring each other down. In an odd way, I remember first starting playing festivals with the band, and sometimes you're sort of pitted against other bands, like your little mini gangs or something. The sort of famous example of this is like Blur and Oasis. I'm not sure they were really enemies, but they were pitted that way, and maybe the media turned them into actual enemies. I'm not sure, but I certainly felt a little bit of that in music, and less so in media.
And there was one more question.
Thank you. My name is Emmett, and I wanted to ask, after leaving Mumford & Sons, what do you feel like was your greatest loss and your greatest gain in making that decision?
well, I mentioned earlier being on stage. Playing music on stage, there's a magic that I don't know how to articulate, and that for me was I do miss that. Although I have played a few shows alone, but there's something about playing with other people, and I still go to the studio to write music, and I love being in the studio, so I still do that. But being on the stage of the band, there was something totally transcendental and special there. That I'm sorry, what was the second half of your question?
Like the greatest gain from it?
I've met wonderful friends. Some of them are in this room. Peter Boghossian's been a great friend, and we only met a few months ago. And another great gain, I tell you, is I can actually speak freely. And it wasn't just at the end or one tweet that got me in trouble. It was years of being in an industry where saying the wrong thing would get you in trouble. And I think, in fact, even working now and learning it took me a few months, maybe even a year, to feel the freedom to say what I think. I'm really worried about the state of the creative industries and how much self-censorship is ruining the arts. I explained this to Audrey earlier in our conversation. If you feel like you can't say something and you go into a room and you're filtering what you say, well, then you pick up an instrument. The brain's going to be still in filter mode, so you're not going to be free-flowing. And it's toxic for creatives and artists. It's a disaster, and I wouldn't write off all the music that's coming out or all the art that's coming out, but I think a lot of it is bland and milquetoast, and it's the result of that atmosphere.
Let's do a question right from the center. We can just work our way around the room. So maybe Joey and then Ian, and then we'll work around.
Hi, thanks so much for talking with us. My name's Joey. I want to ask about that exact comment you just made. So I played in a band for many years, very small potatoes, sort of alternative rock band. But I even found that even in my tiny little context, that I grew up in like punk rock scenes back in the day, right? And nobody really cared very much about political stances. Everybody believed all kinds of crazy stuff, and it just wasn't really the primary sort of thing that people pay attention to. You're kind of in it for the music and the eclecticism and just being eccentric. And then I found when I started playing in my band and kind of like after the 2010s, that there was this increased demand for like statement. It was like there was more attention devoted to artists to make statements at all, which hadn't existed before. And people, I don't remember this huge appetite for looking at even like random local bands or whatever and hoping that they would say certain types of things. And so I guess I'm just sort of curious. You said the way that you had framed it was that there's more self-censorship, there's more of this, and that seems right. But it also seems like that there's that it might be the case that the causal thing is that people are looking more to musicians and looking more to these kinds of people who were never political actors. They were there to play the tunes, but they're being looked at for making certain types of statements. And I guess I'm curious, do you agree with that as a kind of change? And if so, I'm sort of curious what you think might have sort of stimulated that as the cultural appetite for that kind of thing.
Yeah, so we put an album out in 2015, and when we toured that, people didn't ask us about politics. And we put out an album out in 2018, and when we did the press junkets, etc., they didn't ask us about music. There was a change, and it was 2016, and we all know what happened that year. So I do think that there has been a big change, and I don't think that just applies to creatives. I've seen this among friend groups, and 2016 politicized everyone. I actually think that's a good thing when it comes to people, because I think it's our responsibility as citizens to be engaged in. It's a moral responsibility to be engaged with the politics of the time, to make sure that it stays sane and bad ideas are challenged, and for the health of any nation. So I think that's a good thing. But you know, when you're making an album that's got nothing political on it, why? You know, but there is a room for politics in music. There are some artists that are explicitly political. There are songs that are explicitly political. Woody Guthrie or Pete Seeger. You know, sure, Seeger's a communist, but that's part of the. You know, yeah, I want to ask Pete Seeger about communism. It's relevant, but the stuff we were doing, it was, you know, a bunch of posh lads talking about broken hearts. It's not relevant to ask us about Brexit.
Hi, I'm Ian. Thank you for being here. I had a question about your worldview, since, and I don't want to assume anything, but now that you're focused primarily on the political sphere or more broadly, and you've started to pay more attention to it, has anything about your conception of the world changed since you started paying more attention to it?
Well, I have been investigating your new Democratic presidential hopeful, RFK Jr., and he is making me change some of my preconceptions about the vaccines. I'm not fully there, but it's something I took fully for granted. And actually, being in this world, you are forced to really dig into everything, because if you're going to express your opinions publicly, you better bloody well know what you're talking about. And so I'm not fully there, but I had probably taken vaccines for granted growing up. Initially I had tried to see, tried to find a sort of middle ground, and I had been hopeful for a middle ground between liberals and conservatives, and I'm more pessimistic about that. I see more division. But again, maybe it's because I'm always now, it's my responsibility, my job to look at what's going on, so maybe I'm more blind, I don't know, sort of availability heuristic. I see that, where maybe it's not actually there, but yeah.
I got a question. My name is Lawrence. Thank you for being here with us. I got a question in regard to the Uyghur imprisonment, Uyghur genocide. There was recently a scandal in Germany that the biggest car producer, Volkswagen, they had a manufacturing plant in the Xinjiang province. They were not employing Uyghur slave labor, but there are other companies, other big European companies as well. Who are using slave labor to produce, to manufacture, and all of that. Do you think, like, this big money issue, this company issue, that they are there, that this is one of the reasons this genocide is not really tackled in the media? Because there are people out here, there are people in Europe, there are people in the United States who will lose money if that gets politicized.
Well, if you're referring to the media specifically, I will say the Uyghur issue has actually got huge media coverage. It got a lot. It was on the front cover. The first Western newspaper to put it on the front cover was the Jewish News. Jewish News in the UK, but Telegraph have done a lot on it. It has got a lot of media coverage. I think that actually, it's the people don't care. It's almost too distant an issue. For example, in Britain, I think there's only 400 Uyghurs. I don't know how many in America. So, relevance to why the media aren't picking up on it, I think they are actually doing a lot of work. For example, I interviewed a Uyghur called Rahima Mahmut, who's head of the Uyghur Congress, and it's my lowest viewed podcast on YouTube. It's just too distant an issue. And we can't care about every issue in the world, so, you know, we've got to prioritize our own concerns. I sort of understand that, but I'm not sure what it's going to take to ignite the imagination of the masses.
Hi, my name's Johan. I'm from Connecticut. What was the atmosphere like in England during the Black Lives Matter movement? You guys are protesting something that happened in the United States to a black man. And then if you could also, I don't know if this is possible, tell me what the makeup of the protesters were like, because I know that British Caribbean people struggle a bit more socioeconomically. They're not as educated as the West Africans. Did you see a lot of West Africans protesting as well, or were the black people more so people of Caribbean descent?
The protesters were mainly white, but that's because Britain is mainly white. So I would say in my friend group, my black friends, who I think are all African origin, like first or second generation African, all called me out for putting a black square up. Now, I put up a black square, but I did not put the Black Lives Matter capital letters, because I don't support the organization. They're an explicitly Marxist organization. I'd read Patrice Khan-Cullors, I'd read all the literature. I knew this is not an organization I can support. I think I've been vindicated in that, in the 90 million they've raised. I don't think much has, I mean, a lot of it went to their property portfolio. Anyway, you know that story. I got, even putting up a black square, my black friends were, you know, not happy that I did. Again, that might be my circle of friends, whereas my white friends were like, you have to put up a black square. So I'm not sure I could speak more generally about the nation on that.
Thank you.
And we have questions over here now.
This is a little less serious. Also, my name is Wilson, but what are the 5 greatest bands of all time?
Well, the Beatles, obviously, Zeppelin, this is official, right? Yeah, this is the Once and For All. Those two were big for me. Oh, I feel so on the spot now. Who else did I loved this. I listened, when the band were forming, I was listening to tons of Avett Brothers and Old Crow Medicine Show. They were a big inspiration for us growing when we started. I've just watched footage of the Arctic Monkeys headlining Glastonbury. I think they're the best band at the moment, maybe in the world. They're most exciting. Did I get it right or wrong? I don't know. I'm sure you've got your own opinions.
Hi, Winston. My name is Javier. I'm from Orlando, Florida. I just have to acknowledge, from one long-haired person to another long-haired person, I love your hair. But for my actual serious question, what do you think the creative industry, what would it look like for them to kind of like work towards removing themselves from this self-censorship? Because I'm pretty sure that you're not the only person that has felt this.
A bit of balls, a bit of pluck, a bit of courage. Everyone's too scared, I think. Part of that I understand. If you've got family and mortgage, and careers take decades to build up, and if you're a musician that's successful as well, like that's 1 in a fucking million. So that's a big thing to give up. So it's. I'm somewhat sympathetic to people who make that decision and prioritize other things. Family is a noble thing to prioritize. But I miss rock stars who didn't give a damn and said what they thought. That was more exciting to me.
Thank you.
Hi, Winston. I'm Dan. We chatted in Glenn Lowry's seminar yesterday, and thank you for your contribution. You mentioned press junkets, and I've been a big fan of the Graham Norton show for a while. I disagree with his politics, but his quick wit, humor, and personability keep me interested. You've been on the show before, and Ricky Gervais, a famous global gadfly, if you will, is invited quite regularly. I was wondering, do you feel that show in particular is an effective forum for sharing politically pluralistic viewpoints?
No, what Graham Norton's fantastic at doing is making everyone look good. He's got 3 minutes, and he does a wonderful job of whoever it is, making them look as good as they can possibly look on the national scale, and it's a real talent, and he knows how to, he can say almost nothing and he can make you laugh. I think he's a total talent. I don't actually know what his politics are. He did say something about J.K. Rowling about it's not cancel culture, it's accountability culture, which I think is utter nonsense, and you know, death threats for having an opinion you disagree with, that's accountability culture, is it? But doesn't mean I don't think it's a great show, and he's talented, immensely talented man.
If we take a question over here.
Hey, I'm Eddie. I'm just curious because I grew up with your music, and the lyrics especially have been something I've always been drawn to. It truly speaks like poetry to me, and the sources you draw on, like scripture and the Odyssey, and like just personal experience. I'm just curious, do you have a favorite line from your discography? Like a line or a verse that you wrote and you were like, yes, goddamn, that is so good. Like, I'm just curious if you have a favorite line.
That's a very nice question. Thank you. There's one song I wrote that doesn't necessarily, is quite a deep cut, called Wild Heart, which I'm most proud of that song because I think I managed to articulate the complexities of a relationship as best as I could. Lyrically, it's the song I think that I did the best at. I think that it's closest to the truth. I think a great song makes incredibly complex things. Shortest at 3 minutes. When Steinbeck met Woody Guthrie. I think Guthrie had written about one of the songs, and Steinbeck, I can't remember the exact story, but someone said something like, "You managed to it took me 600 pages to do what you did in 3 minutes." And there's a power in the song that you can articulate great feeling and ideas and succinctly, and I think I did it in that song.
And we have a question in the third row over here.
Hey, I'm João from Portugal. I just wanted to know, how do you feel about political art? Do you think it is possible to make, for example, intervention music that is not just propaganda? Maybe Dylan made it, but most people seem to become just ideological and not make actually good art. So what do you think about it?
That's a good question. I love a lot of music that is political. Rage Against the Machine is a famous one. I was brought up on Rage Against the Machine. And Audio Slave, I went to every time they played in London, I went to a show. Although Audio Slave wasn't so political, but Rage Against the Machine, they're, explicitly, communist band. But it was authentic, even though I think that their politics is a load of nonsense, and actually pretty evil nonsense, some of it. But there's a passion and authenticity to where it was coming from that I believed, and something about it resonated. So I'm not against political music. That's a really good question. I think I would need more time to unpack. Like I don't know what a great example of Bob Dylan, but Masters of War criticizing the government for, or I guess you could say, the military-industrial complex. That's I guess a political song, but it's not necessarily party political. When you get into party political, that's when it gets a bit. Yeah. So again, I'm not against it. Would you do it? Well, this Christmas I partnered with Ariel Pink, American indie rock guy who was actually, he was at the Trump rally that preceded the Capitol Hill storming. He wasn't at the Capitol Hill storming. He went to bed. That's what he says, and I believe him. and he got cancelled, dropped by his record label by text message, and we did a song about Hunter Biden's laptop. It was a Christmas song, and it's called Rudolph's Laptop. We had an AI art music video to accompany it, and released it on Christmas Day. No one listened to it, but I'm very proud of it, and I guess that's somewhat political, but it's a joke, it's a piss take.
We have a question all the way over here.
Hello, thank you for coming. My name is Joe, I'm from Montreal, as we already talked. We hear a lot about the fact that people self-censor. I think we all experience it. And then that we have to take care of our family, so that we understand if you want to take care of your family and you keep self-censoring. So it just seems to me like if we stay down that path, it's just going to be the people who are celibate who are going to eventually say something. So I guess, how can you, while having a family and obligations and bills and all of that, still say something?
I wouldn't be so trusting on the celibate, because the celibate, they all want to get laid and start families as well. So they'll manipulate what they say. They'll self-censor just as much. I mean, I'm not sure it's an exact answer to your question, but I would say that even though it's scary, once you actually just say the truth, and you I mean, my philosophy is tell the truth and play the chips as they lie. But that's founded in my faith. I'm a Christian, and I trust Him, and so that's my belief, and it's in His hands. But it's been the adventure of a lifetime, and also I'd say if you're in this room, you're at the University of Austin, it's because you're bright and you're brilliant, and the faculty here see something brilliant in you, and whatever comes your way, whatever you have to give up, you'll be fine. You just work as hard as you can at the next opportunity, and new opportunities will come. Don't be scared. Be fearless.
Manar.
Hello, sir. My name is Manar Al-Din. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I have a question about, you spent years in creating, art, and now you're in, you write scripts for your YouTube, you create videos, and being an artist, when I create something, I have this, this perfectionist part of me that just doesn't want to release it. And I want to see how have you dealt with this throughout your career, and how you've held yourself accountable to, I guess you had to, it was a matter of life or death for you, but how you kept yourself accountable and kept that perfectionist part of you, in check.
That is something that can be so stifling that you can be so critical that it can even stop you from. It's sort of another element from aside from the self-censorship. If you're so precious about something that it can even stop you from letting it come out. Even when I started the podcast, I was so nervous about everything I said. I would check every podcast and be like, oh no, do I mean that? Did I say that right? And I would edit it, and now I've kind of got over that hill, and I just like let it be. And if you make a mistake, people know that you're making mistakes, and you're only human. And but that is a difficult one. I'm not quite sure what the answer is as an artist in getting over that pressure. I mean, that's probably why you're a good artist, is that you have a high standard, and that's worth keeping. So, sorry, it's not a perfect answer to your question.
Let's do the question in the second row first, and then we'll go back to the first row.
My name is Jonah. I'm from Los Angeles. It's been great, really, really great to meet you and hear from you. And I really, really love your ability. I really, really love your ability to question your own beliefs. I think that's like that's just really unique and outstanding. Something I'm really curious about, because of your your first great career as a musician, and then this, you know, the second newer, also, you know, really starting to be like well-established career as a podcaster and more of an activist. I'm curious what you feel like you were able to carry over, and what the commonalities were in terms of how you were able to approach both fields and areas, or whether you really think that your new career, and that, I mean, that's what it seems to be from my perspective, was really just an absolute start from zero, which looks really remarkable.
I'm not sure exactly what carries over. I need to, it did feel like a new start, and completely different skills. And actually, I had to look back over my first interviews, and they're absolute crap. And it's because I didn't really know what I was doing. But I also believe that you get better at things by doing them. And I should also I'm not sure I totally see myself as an activist, but that would, I guess, if I'm considered a journalist, which I also don't consider myself that I don't think you can be both. It's one or the other. But it has felt like a completely new skill set.
It's me again. This time also a creative question. I heard about some musician who had like his creative spot was on the toilet, like he could write his best songs on the toilet. Do you have like a creative spot, and how do you foster that? Maybe not the toilet.
I've written songs on the toilet. I got a lot of melodies walking around town. There's something about movement that does something to the brain. And you're walking around and I hear melodies and then get them on the voice memo. And yeah, that's really helpful. Moving generally, if I could never be in the studio more than 3 or 4 days because I would just lose momentum. There's something about that stimulates the creative impulse. I never was creative on drugs, or when I hear about artists who do all their best work when they're on drugs, I'm like, how? You sort of, you kind of, I just, my experience with that is that you just kind of go in on yourself and nothing comes out. Yeah, the toilets, the shower as well, there's great reverb in the bathroom generally. That's probably why there's a lot of songs written in there.
Do you have a favorite old-time banjo tune or a favorite banjo player?
The guy that made me want to play banjo was Ron Block. He was the banjo player in Alison Krauss and the New Favorite. In Alison Krauss's band, and she had players like Jerry Douglas, and Ron Block was the banjo player, and they have an album called New Favorite. And I found it because it was in my uncle's collection, and I liked the cover, and I put it on. And the production's incredible. For me, country music or old-time mountain music had been kind of crackling old records, and for a kid that was listening to Limp Bizkit and Papa Roach and Blink-182, it didn't quite resonate. And another thing was the old Oh Brother Out There, the Coen Brothers film, which I think that was 2001 or maybe 99, like that sort of period. That soundtrack, which T-Bone Burnett produced, gave me all mountain music, blues, bluegrass, all of that was on that one album. It was an exceptional record of just all American music, and it's phenomenal. But Ron Block was the guy. I was like, oh, that's sick. I want to do that.
Hello, my name is Matthew. What is the soul of America, and what is its relationship to its music?
Was that a mic drop on your question? That was such a good question. Mic drop. That is a good question. Who am I? I'm just to comment on the soul of America. I'm just a shit kicker from Moore Lake. You know, all the great, it's not just jazz and bluegrass and blues and country music. It's also house and techno from Detroit and hip hop. All of this stuff is American music. And obviously, it's black American music. So maybe there's the soul of America. Those are the genres that dominate the world. The foundations of pop music are from those genres, and it comes specifically from black America. That's really worth noting, I think.
Oh, okay, yeah, one over here.
I don't know if I could follow up that question, but I was just wondering what you think Mumford & Sons' best album is.
I'm most proud of the last album we did, Delta. It was so much fun to make with Paul Epworth, who he produced a lot of Adele's best work, and he had a sort of indie rock London background, and making that record was just so much fun. We had all sorts of people coming into the studio, including actually Jordan Peterson, and that got me in a lot of fucking trouble at the time. But the atmosphere was special, and I love those songs on it. So I think that record is my proudest.
Oh, yeah, right over here.
Hello, thank you for speaking to us today. My name's Ava, and I go to Stanford. And I'm curious, as a Christian myself, like, how did your faith guide your work, you know, in the music industry, which typically kind of has a reputation for being kind of against that, or like the sell your soul stereotype. So I'm curious to hear how you did that.
Well, I should confess, I actually became a Christian only a couple of years ago. I was not a Christian when I was working in the music industry, and came to Christ after a very painful divorce. And I would say that I was certainly a cultural Christian, marinated in cultural Christian morals, and I'd explored not just Christianity, various other religions, and I was probably at the church door, but before really converting. But the experience of divorce and the suffering of that brought me into the church on my hands and knees. So, and that was after I was really. It was just before COVID, actually.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you one of the questions that we had to answer to attend this week, which is, what is a view you hold that you think not a lot of other people hold?
I remember when I saw friends of mine in London, there's a podcast called Trigonometry, and they were interviewing Aisha Kambi, who's a great thinker and writer in London, and we could ask her any question, and we asked, what's your most controversial opinion? I can't tell what men aren't women, maybe, or I mean, with the esteemed Kathleen Stock here, maybe that's not such a I'm not the only one who thinks that. I don't think Islam is the religion of peace. That's probably a controversial opinion. Don't get me in trouble. Yeah.
Awesome. I think we have time for 2 more questions, so we'll go here and then in the second row.
So you said that you're a Christian and that you're someone who really values truth. And something I struggle with myself is valuing truth a lot and balancing that with not being unnecessarily honest, red pill, and like adversarial, you know? So I was wondering if you have any heuristics for picking your battles and still valuing truth.
Yeah, I would say I hate the term red pill. I'm not criticizing you there, but for me, red pill is as sanctimonious as the word woke. It sort of assumes we know what's actually true, we're enlightened and awake, and you don't, you just need to see the world. I don't like that term. I've got some rules in like my engagement, like I'll never criticize someone I've ever met personally or have contact with, because I could always just text them or reach out to them. I avoid ad hominem as much as I can. I think that's completely unnecessary. Stick to play the ball, not the man. That's a basic rule. And try. I've definitely slipped up. So I'm sure if you dug into it, you could say, "Oh, you didn't hear it or there." But I try to stick to those rules as much as possible.
Hey, I'm Jonathan from Northeastern University. I'm curious as to what you think. So a lot of creatives think that their best work, it comes to them down from a muse. So not necessarily sprang from themselves, but they're able to kind of tap into something larger. I'm wondering if for your best work, do you have that viewpoint or?
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you. It was a bit.
Yeah. I'm wondering, some creatives think that their best work happens when it comes down to them from a muse, and it's not necessarily their idea, but they're able to tap into something. I'm wondering, do you think that, does your best work, creative work, come from you, or are you able to tap into a muse?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd quite call it a muse, but when you're in the flow and it almost seems like it comes to you from somewhere else, or like a melody comes to you. You hear a melody, sometimes if you're improvising a piece, you're in flow state, and you're not quite sure what you're doing, but it feels like magic. Yeah.
And in addition to your Christmas release, what can we look forward to from you in the coming months?
Well, I have finished a bulk of a new record. But it's very difficult to find someone to, maybe because it's total crap, which is why no one wants to work with me, but which is possible. But I might just self-release.
Awesome.
I've just got to finish that up. Yeah.
Okay.
But,
awesome. Well, Winston, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.